Welcome to Accreditation Made Easy, the podcast that takes the stress out of accreditation. I am your host, Areaka Jewell, and in each episode, we'll deliver actionable tips, expert insights, and practical strategies to help streamline the process. And of course, make your work life a little easier. Now, whether you're tackling policies, preparing for assessments, or just looking for ways to stay ahead, we've got you covered. Let's simplify accreditation, one step at a time. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Accreditation Made Easy. I am your host, Areaka Jewell. And today I want to share one of my favorite reports in PowerDMS. But truth be told, this used to be one of my favorite reports, but then PowerDMS changed the format of reporting, so it kind of fell out of my faves. But now that I have cracked the code to get it back, it's right back up there with the best of them. Now, if you've been following me for a while, then you probably already know how nerdy excited I get when I stumble across something that saves time or gives me information in a way that's easier to understand. And this report checks both of those boxes. In fact, I think it's one of the most overlooked reports in all of PowerDMS. It's called the Status Timeline Report. But what I want to talk about today is the quick way to run it, not the analytic way to run it. Now, if you've never used it before, don't worry. By the end of today's episode, you'll know exactly why I like it so much, what I use it for, and I'll even tell you a little bit about the hack that I alluded to in the intro that I discovered and how it makes it useful again. But before we get there, let me ask you a question. How do you usually answer the question when you get asked, how far along are we? Or where do we currently stand in terms of compliance? Maybe your chief asks you, maybe your direct supervisor, or maybe it's a member of your accreditation team if you're fortunate enough to have a team. But if you're like me and you run solo, maybe you're asking yourself because you've been buried in files for the last 3 weeks, or maybe you're doing something else entirely unrelated to accreditation. Trust me, I feel you. So, how do you answer that? Most people, I think, would either look at the dashboard on the homepage or maybe the quick glance status chart on the main page of the assessment. If not that, maybe you start opening standards and scrolling through chapters and looking at the statuses one at a time. Or maybe you have a spreadsheet or other tracking system outside of PowerDMS. Whatever it is, you're probably mentally trying to piece together the overall picture. I've done it too. Been there, done that. The problem is, our brains aren't always great at taking hundreds of individual statuses and instantly turning them into one clear picture, right? That's where this report shines. Instead of showing one standard at a time, it lays your entire assessment out visually. Every chapter, every standard, color-coded. And did I mention it's all on one page? At a glance, you can immediately see what's in compliance, where work is progressing, maybe where it's stalled, which areas might need your attention. It's really a powerful report, no doubt. Now, here's something some of the newer accreditation managers may not know. Years ago, before the recent or not so recent PowerDMS updates, we had what many of us old-timers referred to as Old Report Builder. If you've been around a while, you're probably smiling right now because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Back then, there were a lot more options for customizing reports. One of them being the same status timeline report. And one thing many of us played around with was the number of columns on the status timeline report. Why? Because we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We wanted to get that beautiful color-coded chart to print on just one page. I remember spending way more time than I'd like to admit adjusting those settings until everything just fit. Then PowerDMS evolved. The reports tools changed. And today, if you run the status timeline report through analytics, you'll get the same information, but it's going to look completely different. You still get the colorful visual of each standard status, but it's something that looks more like a spreadsheet with each standard in one row. Still useful, just it's different. And honestly, not nearly as easy to digest when you're trying to get a quick snapshot of your assessment. So the report I'm talking about, the one that looks like the fancy chart that the old report builder used to produce, I'll refer to it as the quick status timeline report. You get to it by going to the root of your assessment, and if you don't know what that means, you just click on the name of your assessment in the left-hand blue column that lists all your assessment options if you have more than one, but just click on the name of it. And when you hover over the status chart that shows up on the right-hand side of the page, it breaks down each status, but it also gives you the option to run a report. But one thing continued to bother me about this report. It would come up in all the fancy color-coded chart, but it wasn't customizable. As soon as you click that run report, it just came up with whatever information it was already pulling from your assessment. But you know me, you know I have a hard time accepting it can't be done. Not because I'm stubborn or anything. Okay, maybe a little bit, but mostly because I'm curious. I started wondering, how is this report actually being generated? Where is it getting the information? Is it really fixed and static? Or is there something happening behind the scenes? So naturally, I started playing around with the different download formats and analytics, but every download format that I tried, it still wouldn't give me the chart format that I was looking for. So I went back to the quick status report and started digging a little bit more, and I noticed something interesting. When the report opens, if you look at the URL of the page, there's a lot of information packed into it. Things like assessment ID, the manual, start date, display options, interview counts, column counts. And it got me thinking, what if I start changing some of these? Now, let's be clear. This wasn't something I just figured out instantly. There was a lot of trial and error. I tried different dates, different interviews. Some wouldn't display the way I expected. Some made me laugh because they were so far off. But eventually, I started figuring out what each piece of the URL controlled. And that's when I started to realize something. The report wasn't nearly as static as I originally thought. I had basically cracked the code. And one of the biggest discoveries was the column count. And using today's start date as the start date, because I only really want to see my status as of today, and then only show one interview, meaning only show 1 year's worth of statuses. That's what would give me the most current, up-to-date status report. But after experimenting with the different values, I found that setting the column count to 10 would consistently give me the nicest one-page layout. Now, will that matter to everyone? Maybe not. But if you've ever wanted to print this report, maybe include it in a meeting packet, or simply have a clearer vision of your assessment, it's a nice little trick to have in your back pocket. And honestly, I love discoveries like this, not because they're flashy, but because they're practical. It's one of those little things that makes using PowerDMS just a little bit easier. Now, I do want to mention something else. You may know that there's another report called the Standard Status Report, and people sometimes assume that they're interchangeable. I don't. I actually use them for completely different purposes. The Status Timeline Report answers the question, where are we? The Standard Status Report answers, what do we need to do next? And that report exports beautifully into Excel, and I use it to track work, create assignments, add deadlines, build action plans. It's much more of a management tool. The timeline report, that's my dashboard. It's my snapshot. It's the report I pull up when I simply want to understand what the current state of the assessment is in a pretty chart format. So, don't think of these as competing reports. Think of them as solving two different problems. One gives you perspective, and the other helps you manage the work. And of course, as always, I put together a companion document for today's episode that's going to walk you through running the status timeline report the quick way, explains the URL parameters that I modify, and I also include an updated video showing exactly how I do it. And if you're not already signed up for my free Accreditation Academy content hub, this is exactly the type of practical tip that you'll find there every week. I'm always adding new, helpful tips, proof bank examples, companion documents, videos, templates, podcasts, all designed to make accreditation a little bit easier. And if you'd like to explore everything that's available, I'm happy to offer a free, no obligation trial, and you'll find a link in today's show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode today, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share it with another accreditation manager or someone else on your assessment team, because you never know. This might become their favorite hidden PowerDMS report, too. All right, friends, until next time, let's keep making accreditation easy, one step at a time.